Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, dare I say, BASCHAMANIACs, welcome back to BASCHAMANIA, the podcast where you can get the stories, insight, laughs, and knowledge from the absolute best wrestlers in the world. If this is your first time here, I'm your host, Justin Bash, and as always, I'm grateful for you giving the show a listen. If you're a repeat listener, dare I say, a BASCHAMANIAC, which I can't really say with a straight face, but if you're a pro wrestling fan, you understand where that's coming from. Either way, thank you. The more love you show this show, the more I want to keep taking it up a notch. Speaking of taking it up a notch, if you're an avid listener of the podcast, or if you just happen to get a ton of value out of this episode, if you want to support the podcast, the easiest thing you can do is subscribe to the podcast and leave us a 5-star review and a rating on Apple Podcast. If you want to support the show even more, there is now apparel, t-shirts, long sleeve t-shirts, hats, stickers, magnets, all available at shop.bashmania.com. But even if you're just listening to this show, I appreciate the support and your time. Speaking of this show, now, the reason you are listening, today we have arguably one of the most successful wrestlers yet on the podcast. I'd be here all day if I rattled off his accomplishments, but he's a 4-time NCAA champ at 4 different weight classes, the only one to ever do that. He's a Hodge Trophy winner, and he's a 2-time world champion, along with a plethora of other accomplishments. And this April, if he wants to check that final box of being an Olympic champion, he's got to go through 5-time world and Olympic champion Jordan Burroughs. We talk about all that and more in the following conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show.
It's BASCHAMANIA! Let me tell you something, brother. He gave us everything he had in him tonight. What you gonna do when BASCHAMANIA runs wild on you? Oh, it's gonna be a good one. And business just picked up here on the podcast. Oh, yeah.
How you doing, Kyle?
I'm good. How you doing, Justin?
I'm good, man. I'm pumped to have this conversation. I think the first conversation you and I had that I remember was on press row at the Worlds in 2015 in Vegas. And I remember wanting to chat more because I feel like you're one of the most unique wrestlers in the sport, especially from not only just success, but the way you approach the sport. So super pumped to dive in and talk about everything that's led you to today. So I know you just traveled to Colorado Springs for the training camp, and I'm curious, what's the competitive environment like there right now? I mean, 2 months out from the trials, you guys are all at the peak of your training and prep. What's the vibe there right now?
I think, Coach Zadek is trying to make it so that, it's like, oh, it's about the team. We're trying to qualify the weights.
Yep.
And that's it. But at the same time, you look around the room and you're like, oh, I'm probably going to have to wrestle that guy, probably have to wrestle that guy, probably have to wrestle that guy. So it's like, you kind of – you want to get better. And at the end of the day, you want to win an Olympic gold medal. So, you're going to try to gain as much knowledge as you can, and you're going to bet on yourself. And that's a big thing for me is just like, all right, I know these guys are going to be here, but I'm confident in my ability to get better faster than their ability to, figure out what I'm doing to get better.
Sure.
So, there's like today, I literally asked every single person in the room. Well, not every person. I knew who everyone's partner was.
Yep.
Like, hey, you got one? They're like, yeah, I'm going with Machiavella. All right.
Yep.
Hey, you got one? Yeah, I'm going with Ashnall. Hey, you got one? So it's just like over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
And so then the last 2 guys who didn't have a partner were me and Zach Sanders. So we worked on our morning skills and, got better. So that was good.
That's sweet. And I want to dive in more to 74 kilos in the Olympics and this documentary you got going. But before that, I want to go back a little bit and establish some of your backstory and hear some of the perspective that led you here. I mean, you have one of the most chronicled college careers of all time, but I feel like the senior level is so interesting because as soon as you become a world champion in wrestling, you accrue so many fans. And I'm not only sure there's certain fans who want to hear more of your backstory, I know I'm curious. So the first thing we'll kind of start when you were young, growing up, getting started in wrestling, when did you know you were good? Like, when did you know you had a future in front of you that would be one that everyone knows? You were a 4-time NCAA champ in 4 different weight classes, the only one to ever do that. And any real follower of this sport will remember that. Like, when did you know you were going to be good?
I had always thought I was, thought I was good. I always thought I was going to be pretty good, but I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
So I was winning local tournaments, but then, we'd drive a couple hours away and I would lose a match or two. And then, whether I remember going to Tournament of Champions out in Ohio,
yep,
and running into David Taylor and running into Logan Stieber and being like, what the heck? How am I ever going to beat these guys?
Right.
And then really when it kind of clicked for me was, my 6th grade year. I was a schoolboy, and we went out to schoolboy duels, and I just mowed through pretty much everybody. The one loss I took in Greco was to Logan Stieber, but I was like, I should have beat him. So I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I feel pretty good about that, even though you never feel good about a loss. But,
right.
And then I lost to another kid, Chris Villalonga, who, he pretty much won everything when we were kids too. And so I was like, oh, I could be pretty good now. And then I went to Tournament Champions that year and won it. And I was like, okay, I've never won this tournament. I've been here like 5 or 6 times, never won. Now I finally won. And I think I can be pretty good. But then, so then my 7th and 8th grade year, I wrestled varsity, and I was a lot smaller than everyone because I only weighed about, 78 pounds, and you had to weigh
right.
88 to wrestle the minimum weight, which was 96. So
yep.
I was tiny wrestling a lot bigger guys, and I was doing really well. I think my record was like 25-5. There was no wild cards, and it was 1 division back then. Or no, it had just turned 2 divisions, but the state champ was from our section. So, I wasn't really expecting to go. He was a 5th-year senior, or not 5th-year senior. He was a senior going, and he had planned on going to Iowa Central. And I was like, oh man, this guy's incredible, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so it was just like, it was tough. My 7th grade year, but that's when I knew, I'm like, I can beat these guys. Like, I know I can beat them. If I was their size, I'd beat them. And, when I finally became a normal sized high school kid, which was still a pipsqueak, I was 96 my freshman year.
Right.
I finally was winning in a lot of different places. And, I'd taken some rough losses. I was undefeated my freshman year in high school, and then was beating the guy 9-0 going into the 3rd period, and shot a sloppy single leg, got spoiled and pinned. My only loss of the year. Oh man, I was heated. I was so mad.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to you often.
No, and but it's just like those little things. Like it almost seems like you have to have something like that to push you to want to get better, to kind of create that obsession.
And that's what I was going to ask you next, is like how you continue to get better. When you said, like, right now, like one of the main storylines for Olympic trials, which we'll get into in a few minutes, is like you and Burroughs. And over the last 5 years, it's been you and Burroughs and Taylor. And even young, you had Logan, a 4-time NCAA champion, and Taylor, a world champion and NCAA champion. Already you were in that group. Like, how did you set out to get better and establish yourself even more?
I think a little bit was just like stubbornness on my part, and I say that in the most endearing way ever. Is like,
sure,
when you see these guys, they're just stubborn, they're stingy, and they don't want to give ground in anywhere in their wrestling. And it's funny because you see them outside the room or outside the competition area, and they're not stubborn. And I felt that same way.
Sure.
When I was a kid, I was stubborn all over just because I felt like I had to be to get by. Because I was a little kid, I would always get picked on by my older friends, even though I could take them down.
Right.
It was still just, it's like, oh, this little guy's beating up on me. But, so it's like I always felt like I needed to prove myself a little bit. And then when I got to college, I just wanted to get better. And my first 2 years, I had lost 2 times, and then the next year everyone was saying how I wouldn't have won if so and so was healthy, or my
right.
weight class, everyone left and graduated, and I was just like, man, I need to no, I need to show that I'm the best. And, so then I ended up going up and wrestling the 4th weight class and kind of cement myself in college history.
Sure.
But then, I felt like there was some time, like, I still felt like I needed to get better. And ever since 2013, I had thought, I was the best in the world. I thought I was the best, most talented guy in the world. I could win a world championship. And, just the way things worked out, I never had an opportunity to prove it.
Right.
And that's the system that we're under as a sport. And, it kind of has to be that way. I thought I was there, and I had beaten really good guys. I had beaten Sargouche, I had beaten Chabanah, who was a medalist. Yep. And, I'd beaten a lot of really good guys. And I just happened to be in the same weight class as Jordan. And, there was never a time in my career where I thought, he is so much better than me. There is no chance I'll ever be able to beat him. And, I had seen the work that he had put in the room, and I was like, man, I worked just as hard as this guy. Right. And, you watch him go out and, kind of decimate people. And then I'm like, man, I could do that too. And, I think in 2013, I went over to the World Cup in Azerbaijan and was wrestling all the same, because there was a camp. I was wrestling all the same guys that he was wrestling because I was the backup, and nobody wanted to wrestle, Jordan. Jordan didn't want to wrestle those guys leading up to the match in case they tried to punch him in the face and break his nose. Right. So, I wrestled those guys and I was just crushing them too. I was like, man, I am right there. And, the kind of story after that is, kind of written out there. 2014 I was hurt. 15 I came back, with a few months training, and still didn't get it done. And then 16 I came back and went up a weight class because there was nobody sitting out, and was inches away from making the team. And it, just frustration after frustration. Yeah. Get shoulder surgery, come back, short training cycle again, wrestle, fall short again. And then 18, I feel like, man, I have an opportunity here. I don't have cutting weight, and I can wrestle where I feel good. I'm gonna go do it. And lo and behold, win a world title. Come back the next year, win a world title, and here we are, ready for the next Olympic run.
And I'm curious too, because you were very successful at the college level and you were very successful at the senior level, and yet both paths look so different. Like you had adversity in college, but it looked different than your adversity at the senior level. And I'm curious, like, it's obviously such different pressures too. Like the pressure at the senior level to make the Olympic team is different than it was in college. Do you feel the difference in the pressure? Like, I don't know if you put pressure on yourself to like wanting to become a 4-time national champ at 4 different weights, and even being a 4-time national champ, aside from just the 4 different weight classes, like that is such an accomplishment. Do you feel a difference in the pressures from setting out for both of those goals?
I've spoken on this in the past about what I view pressure as, and in the past I had said, pressure is not a real thing. It's, your body telling you that you're ready to go. And to an extent that is true. You're literally you're getting butterflies because you have adrenaline dumped into your stomach, and your body's just fight or flight, ready to go. And if you can just take that stance on it, you don't have to, constantly wear yourself out and get tired leading into those big moments.
Sure.
But it's just, and what's the difference between a big moment and a small moment? It's hard to tell at the time. When you look back, you can kind of be like, wow, that was a really big moment and I got through it. But at the time of it, it just seems like another thing. It seems like another moment that's passing by, and you're like, oh, I'm going to get through this. Anyway.
And do you feel the difference when it's like, throughout your career, you've had different frustrations too, whether it's injuries for a couple of years and then being a runner-up for a couple of years for the world team, Olympic team trials. Like, how do you overcome that adversity and stay the course? Like you said, like you're one of the absolute best wrestlers in the world, and here you're you've the 2 times you made the world team, you've won the world championship in dominance. So from your whole career how successful you are and how good you are. How do you overcome that adversity when something doesn't go your way and you don't make a team and you're the runner-up, though you know how good you are? It's not, you didn't win because you're not good enough, right? Like, how do you stay focused and stay the course to not get discouraged, which I feel like so many people get sidetracked by that discouragement?
You know, that's the kind of crazy thing about wrestling is that, you know, it's so intimate that you have to, you only have yourself to blame. Yep. And you only have really yourself to give success. And that changes a little bit. You know, there are coaches, I've had coaches who are like, you know, I feel bad because I feel like I didn't prepare you well enough to go out there. I'm like, listen, you know, we did exactly what we had to do to go out there. We can't be, you know, second guessing ourselves now. You know, I believe, you know, I've had the exact right training that I've needed to the past 3.5 years.
Sure.
And I've never felt better, but at the same time, when you win, everyone's willing to accept, you know, responsibility when you win.
Sure.
You know, people are willing to accept that. And I'm not saying that just for me. I can see it, you know, I see it with other athletes, not only in wrestling, but in other sports. You know, when you know, your team wins the championships, everyone's like, yeah, we did this. And then, you know, if your team happens to lose, it's like, oh man, it was the ref's fault. Oh, we were injured. We had this. And it, you know, you build excuses to kind of keep yourself from crumbling all the way to the bottom.
Yep.
And, you know, and I'm not saying that excuses are necessary or relevant or irrelevant for that matter. It's just, you know, the way people cope with events that happen. And, you know, you don't want to care too much that, you know, it ruins your entire life, but you don't want to care too little to where, you know, you're not willing to spend the extra time, you know, thinking about it or getting, you know, putting those extra hours like, oh, I need to drive down to get different partners. I need to go to Penn State. I need to go Ohio State. I need to go, you know, I need to fly these two Russians in. I need to bring in whoever it is to come train with me. You know, if you don't care enough, you're just like, oh, I'm good where I'm at. I can handle this, and we'll be good to go. So there's a little bit of a balance there, and you know, I think that the best guys in the world figure out that balance, and you know, they don't really second guess themselves once they enter down a path.
Sure, and you know, speaking of never feeling better, like especially it seems post college, you've developed such a pretty unique training regimen and a perspective on health. You know, I've seen different like flow films and your Instagram content. Like you've got certain water filters and red screen on your phone, orange glasses. You do the functional pattern training, which seems absolutely insane to view it, right? And the vitamin D and walking barefoot and all these things. Like it's such a unique perspective. And I'm curious, what led you to that? And then how do you personally judge if you feel better? Like how much time do you give it? Or how do you weigh these things up and say, okay, this is actually working, or maybe I just think this work, or like how do you judge that?
You know, there's a lot to unpack in that whole thing, but I think the main reason that I was willing to change was because I wasn't getting the results I needed to. Mm-hmm. And I felt that those results, the reason I didn't get those results is because I was hindered in some way or another, whether it be an injury, whether it be I wasn't strong enough, whether it be I wasn't fast enough. There was something going on where I was like, you know what, I need to make a change for the better. And it's actually funny. In 2013, my wife and we got an apartment together, and I remember distinctly sitting on the couch and watching a movie, and I forget what movie it is, but they were talking about, you know, increasing your mitochondrial potential by 1.5%, and it created this like huge physical output. And I was like, so that like kind of led me down this path, like, okay, well, how can I enhance my mitochondria in a way that will allow me to produce more energy? Or
you're so much smarter than me, because that's so far over my head on what I can comprehend. It's wild that resonated with you.
And you know, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was so wrapped up in the fact of wanting to get better.
Sure.
And even if it was a sci-fi movie and they were talking about it, it's like, man, that makes sense. There's got to be a way that I can enhance my cellular biology so that at the micro level, I'm the best I can possibly be. And I started to do that, and I did start to feel better. I started to feel noticeable changes. And, the funny thing is you'll feel a change, and then it becomes your norm. And then once it becomes your norm, the only way you can tell that it's working is if you step away from it. And, I kind of view it as like a diet. So let's say you do an elimination diet and you do it for a while, and then you're feeling really, really good. And then all of a sudden you're like, man, you know what? I'm going to introduce X food. And you introduce it, and then you're like, oh, wow, I feel horrible. That's kind of the way I view it with all these other therapies that I'm doing. And it made sense to me because I wanted to get back to when humans were like just gladiators, when they
primal,
were
right?
So they were so badass and tough. They had to, withstand the elements. They didn't have all these little luxuries, and they just had to. They had to survive. And
right.
I needed to put myself in a similar situation. Like, okay, these guys are doing this. I should probably try to mimic that in as many ways as possible without, killing my, future wife. I wanted
Right.
to have no heat in the house. I wanted everything to, I wanted us to have wool blankets and leave the windows open in the middle of winter and no heat and blah, 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 blah. And it just obviously doesn't make a lot of sense with the technological advances that we have.
Right.
But, I was starting to change my diet. I was starting to eat more of a paleo diet. And, I had bounced around with different forms. And, I had a lot of help from my college roommate, actually. He was like planting these seeds in my brain, probably since we moved in together sophomore year, and he had been planting seeds for 3 or 4 years. Like, hey, you got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. I'm like, yeah, I'm winning. Don't worry about me.
Right.
And, I can have my sugar cookies, jalapeno chips, and Diet Mountain Dew all I want, because,
right.
all I have to do is make weight and I'm going to go kick ass. And
right.
I wasn't really thinking about it because I was just young and stupid. I wasn't willing to listen, and I thought that I knew the best way to do it. And, maybe it worked, but was it the best way? Looking back, no, absolutely not. And did it cause some future health problems? Yeah, probably. And, so there was just a lot of learning to go into it. And, as a person who wanted to make it into a career, you gotta leave no stone left unturned. And that's kind of what I did. And, so my roommate introduced me to his future mother-in-law, and she does holistic health, chiropractic medicine, all sorts of, what people would call, alternative medicine.
Yep.
And it works, and not only does it work, there's no like side effects to it that well, maybe there are. The side effects are beneficial though.
Right.
I'm not worried about, oh man, I have ridiculous acid reflux after taking that, antibiotic or whatever it was.
Right.
It's just, it's a different way of looking at the human body. And after doing it one way for so long and making the switch and feeling that difference, I was like, there's no going back for me. Like, I can't go back. And that was really the kickstart to this whole thing. Was like my buddy planting those seeds, trying to enhance my mitochondria. And then all of a sudden I'm just like doing everything. I'm grounding or earthing. I'm getting out in the sun in the morning, even when it's cloudy in the middle of winter. I'm got my phone screen red. There's so many protocols that I follow that now it just seems normal to me. Like, it doesn't change. It doesn't hinder my day in any way. It's just other people are like, oh, you actually do that? Like, yeah, man, I'm trying to win. I'm trying to take every advantage I can. And and then finally, one of the last pieces, and even the biggest piece of the puzzle was, with functional patterns, Nowdy Aguilar and Pablo Martin. Pablo was my guy for 2 years at Cornell, and Nowdy is, he's the founder of it, and he's been by my side this whole time. We've had bumps in the road, and it always seems to work out for us. And I help him because I just happen to be a really good athlete, and he can learn stuff from watching me move. But then I learn 100-fold from him, just like trying to figure out the human predicament, which is we don't move very well as a species. Like, people don't move well. They have pain. They're coping with so many different things in their life that they don't realize what they're doing. And being able to move pain-free has been a luxury, because I see, I had been the guy who had been in a bunch of pain. I had been that guy who, had to deal with all those injuries and deal with, not feeling your best. And now I see it everywhere. I see it with college athletes. I see it with high school athletes. I see it with senior level athletes. There's guys out here who come up to Nowdy and be like, hey, I just started doing FP. Like, I got this practitioner back at home, and, everything's going great. I just want to say thanks and blah, blah, blah. And, it's kind of cool to see, the impact that, I've had bringing FP into the wrestling world. And these guys are like dumbfounded with how good they feel, and, with how the way they're moving and the changes that have been made. Like, holy cow, this is potent stuff. And, the message behind it is just, what do humans do? They walk, run, and throw really, 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 really well. And the reason they can do that is just, we're bipedal organisms. We walk on 2 feet. The way our hips are shaped, the way our shoulders evolved, made us the most precise throwers of any species on this planet. And knowing those 3 things is like, okay, let's try to perfect those 3 things, and then everything else we can kind of adapt to it.
Right.
So, with my wrestling, there's no proper way to wrestle. There's so many different variations. But there is a proper way to run, and there is a way to do that, because that's the way bones are shaped, and that's the way joints are made. And if you can do it, a lot of people run with a lot of pain. They're like, oh, I just got to ice my back, or I got to ice my knees, and this hurts and that hurts. And it's like, when I run now, I don't hurt at all. I mean, I feel good when I run. I feel like my body's just like pumped up. Like, I just feel like blood flow just going everywhere, to all my muscles, and I'm just ready to rock and roll. I can go out and perform, whether it be a wrestling match or, helping out my parents around the house, or, fixing something at my house.
Sure.
Those are just the things that, you just feel good. And that journey from, it's actually pretty cool, because you brought up the documentary before, but he has all of that footage, like the complete character development of Kyle Dake has been documented. From 2012 until 2020, he has footage of who I was as a young man who just graduated Cornell University to, a husband and father that I am today, and, Olympic gold medalist hopeful. So,
and that's nuts, by the way. I was at dinner with Bo Nickel the other night, and he was telling me, like, man, because we were talking about content and different things from a brand standpoint, and he was saying, it's like, yeah, Kyle's had a guy filming him since 2012. And I'm like, man, that is awesome. Like, I don't know if you know who Gary Vee is, but like, one of the things I love about him is that he's recording so much content that he'll be able to look back with his kids, with his family, with grandkids 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. And I wish I had more discipline to chronicle everything going on. Like, what made you start doing that? Like, how did that come to fruition?
It kind of just happened. In 2012, after I had won, my third NCAA title, there was some buzz about and wrestling at the trials, there had been some buzz about me potentially going up and blah, 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 blah. And when I finally made the decision that I was going to do that, this guy out in California who had produced some movies in the past was like, hey, he called Coach Cole. He's like, hey, we need to do a documentary on this. Like, we need to make sure we have all this content leading up to the big moment when he wrestles, David at NCAAs. And this guy, Greg Aceta, he wrestled off Long Island and then went to NYU, became a film student, and still wrestled, and then graduated, was working on sets and doing, he had been on a few commercials. He hadn't done much directing, but basically he kind of learned on the fly.
It's the best way to do it.
How to use, what angles to get, how to set it up, how to,
Sure.
do all this stuff. And it's funny because it's the change in the quality from his end has been remarkable, because
Right.
not only has it been a transformation of 2012 Kyle to 2020 Kyle, it's been a transformation of 2012 Greg to 2022 Greg, or
Sure.
20 Greg, and his ability to capture moments and knowing where to be, when to be there, is pretty cool. And he's done a really good job doing it, and it kind of just happened. He had all this footage, and he didn't own any of it, but the 4for4 documentary had the rights to it all.
Right.
And he ended up trying to get those rights back from the guy, and he's like, yeah, you can have them. He's like, hey, I want to follow you until 2016, because at the time, it was released, I think it was 2014. They're trying to release it by NCAA's 2014, the whole thing. And I think they ended up getting it out a little bit after NCAA's. But he's like, hey, we got the Olympics coming up in 2 years. Like, how about we just continue this thing, and I'll just keep getting interviews, and I'll kind of come up whenever I can. And I was like, yeah, dude, sure, if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to. I was cool with the documentary that he had for my senior year in college. I wasn't expecting anything else. And he's like, yeah, I really want to do this. And, we got talking about it. I'm like, this is awesome. This is really, really cool. And, so now we're in the stage where we have, I don't even know. I think he said he had nine hard drives just full of stuff.
Wow. That's wild.
And it's and a lot of it is of me wrestling or me practicing, or just him interviewing me, hey, what are we doing right now? Hey, what's going on? Where are we? And, it's hey, we're in Rome, Italy, and we're getting ready to go to the finals of the first ranking series, and pretty excited. He's like, how you feeling first time down to 74? And it's just cool, to have all that.
Oh, it's amazing, dude. I envy that.
And it's crazy because a lot of this, it's going to be, I don't know how long it's going to be, whether it's going to be 90 or 120 minutes or something. But we're going to have 100 times that amount of footage that we can tap
easily
into and and use, for all sorts of things. But it's hard for him because he's not getting, he's just following me around. He's not getting paid to do it.
Right.
So now we've gone to the U.S. Wrestling Foundation, and they're helping us out a lot, which is really, really cool. Because they'll just be able to get that story out there, and it's going to be a not-for-profit film, and he's finally going to be able to get the resources that he needs to make this into something special. Before it was just him sitting on his laptop, going through all the footage, transcribing it all, trying to put it all together, and then now he can actually go to an editing company and get it all mixed and mastered and everything like that. So we're pretty excited for where it's going to be and where it's going to end up. And
do you know when potentially you want to release it? Do you have a potential idea?
The goal is 2021, early 2021. And really the lead up to it, it's January, so we got 11 months to kind of get it, well, less than that, to the Olympics is, we have however much time to get prepared for that. And then August ideally it would be, the released a similar around the same time as NCAAs, just because that's when all the buzz is.
Sure. Yep.
And maybe we can air it. I don't know where it's going to end up. But if nothing else, hopefully Greg gets his money back, that he's put into it, because he put a huge, not only time investment, but, from his monetary investment into it, just, flying to all these different places and doing all these things. Hopefully he gets his money back. And then if nobody else in the world watches it, at least I'll have it for my grandkids and for my kids to watch. So that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, man, I'm absolutely pumped. When I heard about that, I'm like, that's wild. I mean, I love content, and I love chronicling and documenting things, and it's kind of one of the next things that I want to bring up. I'm curious on your perspective on content and social media and what doesn't go on. I've been around long enough in the sport to know that wrestling especially, there's so many secrets, intentionally, unintentionally, and from a marketing standpoint, I obviously hate them, because the more communication you have, the more hype you can build, the more you can engage your fans, but I obviously don't know the back end. Like, I was with Kel Sanderson a couple days ago, and we were talking about social media and podcasts and everything, and I'm always curious on the other side, because being in marketing, I'm always like, the more content, the better, but there's always two sides to the story. And, I always wonder, like, right now, why doesn't Jaden announce his weight? Or, like, you didn't specifically, it was kind of hinted and known, but, you didn't really say you were going 74 until you weighed in Italy, or until USA Wrestling announced it. And I remember, like you said, like, new weight, new year, same goals. And I'm just curious, like, the athlete perspective on what goes into, like, when you want to communicate something and when you don't. Is it more like trying to build suspense and excitement? Is it more, do you think it's like an advantage over competitors? Or what goes into that from the athlete perspective on when you, obviously all the fans, like, they want everything released. And there's so many things that I'm kind of privileged to know and hear from having so many relationships on the back end that, I see people on Twitter all day long saying stuff, and I know so many true stories, and I just bite my tongue out of respect for my relationships. But I'm curious on your perspective on that, on what you kind of keep to yourself, especially when you're chronicling it, right? Like, you're creating a documentary, so you're also creating sweat equity in that content. But I'm curious on the perspective of when you kind of tease things out, or when you keep things to yourself, like, what goes into that?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's, creating a little bit of suspense is beneficial to, who you are, because people are just, like, itching, like, constantly asking, like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? How are you doing this? What's going on? Blah, 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 blah. And, that's something that's pretty valuable, because now people want to know, if there's nothing else going on, people are like, oh, Kyle, I know exactly what's going on in Kyle's life. That's it. And, I don't really need to ask any more questions. And, but at the same time, it's like, you kind of want to keep some stuff close to the vest, because, why do they need to know? Why does the world need to know exactly what I'm doing every second of the day?
Sure.
I'd rather that come out later when, I'm releasing it on my time. It comes out in this long documentary, and now people are like, that's what happened. Oh, that's what
right.
That's how that happened. That is really cool. Blah, blah, blah. And, I just think it's just like a different way of communicating to your fans, is like, hey, you'll get all of it. You just got to be patient. And there's not very many people who are willing to be patient anymore. Right.
We live in a very, like, what have you done for me lately society. We live in a very instant gratification society where, we all have so much access to so much content. And, typically the more successful someone is, and especially within the sport of wrestling, the more successful they are, the more they kind of keep things close to their chest. You see the guys who are, multiple-time world Olympic champions keeping more and more to themselves, and obviously that creates the awe of, like, what's going to happen next. So I'm always just curious, it's like, even now as a fan, like, I want to know, is Cox going 86? Is he going 97? Like, is he going to wrestle Dave? Is he going to wrestle Kyle? And I'm sure Jaden's kind of, if I have to be honest, like, I like it from a suspense standpoint, because you don't know. So it keeps you wondering, and it keeps you kind of staying tuned. I think you're unique too with having a documentary where not many people are going to have that opportunity you're creating for yourself, which is you're going to have all the answers. Like, you're going to hear the story behind it, and I'm sure that at this point, I'm sure that only contributes more to what you're doing. Like, does it give you more of a perspective going into stuff like the OTC and the Olympic trials and over this next 6 months? Like, are you trying more to create suspense that you can hold on to for the documentary?
You know, a little bit, nothing crazy. I mean, I'm not trying to, create suspense just to create it. I'm not gonna, change the way I'm training or change the things I'm doing, because of that. But, there's a part of me that's like, man, should I go to the OTC and kind of show my hand a little bit?
Right.
And, not only, and I said this before, you're showing your hand, but so is everybody else.
Right.
So is everybody else. And, there's been times where you go and you have, it's funny, you're wrestling and you're wrestling, a guy from another RTC, but there's another coach who's not even a part of your RTC or their RTC. And they're just sitting there watching you wrestle. They're just getting free scouting report, by doing that. Yeah. And, it's not just happening to me. It happens all the time. And, coaches are just, they sit there and, they try to hide the fact that they're not watching you, but
right. Of course.
You know how they're operating, because they're trying to get any advantage they can. And they see this as a potential advantage. Like, why would they take it? So, but that's part of it, because I'm, I've weighed both sides. I'm like, you know what, I can get better by going out there, and I can improve myself enough to where whatever they're finding is going to be irrelevant.
Totally. And, I think, like, looking towards the Olympic trials, we're about 2 months away now, and your weight is arguably the most interesting story of any weight. I mean, you're a 2-time world champion, and you're going to have to beat the likes of Jason Nolf, a 3-time NCAA champ, Aymar, multiple-time national champ, Jordan Burroughs, a 5-time world and Olympic champ. Like, what's the mindset when you know that, it's kind of funny. Like, you hear the cliche of a setback is a setup for a comeback or something like that, and you've kind of had those setbacks in your career, and it sounds like through the advantages you've gained through the unique training and health perspective, like, you've definitely benefited from the runner-up positions and the losses, and now here you're coming off a 2-year run of just being unstoppable, as absolutely dominant as it comes, and here to make the Olympic and world team, like, you got to beat just such an unbelievable field. Like, what's the perspective that goes into that, to know, like, you have to 100% be on point? And is it a blind, not blind, but like, is it a blind trust in your training thus far, or do you still kind of try to make adjustments further, knowing that, you're 2 months out from such important matches?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like quiet confidence. I am just like really confident in my training, that I know that, like, I have the absolute best training in the world. I've looked elsewhere. I've tried to find it. It's not out there. I got it. And
sure.
I've looked for, with FP, and even Nowdy will say it. He's like, I hope there's someone that figures this out better than me. That way I can just follow them and let them do all the work. That makes my life way easier. I can just do whatever they say and I'm good to go.
Right. But, makes it easier.
Yeah. So, like, it's not like for a lack of effort, like trying to find, like, a training program, like, hey, this actually looks like it might be better than what I got. I'm going to test it out. And that's a big thing for me. I'm just testing constantly, testing what we're trying to do, whether it be a, wrestling technique, or whether it be a biomechanical change or corrective exercise, or, a different MFR technique. I'm just constantly trying to improve myself, and realize that, a lot of times it's going to be, I'm on the razor's edge. I'm on the cutting edge of fitness, and biomechanics and health. And I literally have I can't see any other mode of training that will put me better than where I'm at right now. So like just having that confidence in your training is like, okay, let's go. And a lot of it has to do with, I'm not going to, mention any names, but there's guys who, do different training protocols and they think they have the best training protocols.
Sure.
But they're coming to me for advice. They're
Yep.
coming, hey, what do I do here? And then I tell them and they're like, wow, that worked. Like, that's really good stuff. Okay, cool. But then they go back and do, whatever they were doing. So, I know I've put hundreds of changes out there on wrestlers and been like, hey, do this, you'll feel better. And they do it and they're like, oh, that's great. And from their perspective, it's just like, oh, it's just another wrestler helping out another wrestler. I've done the same thing. But, the stuff I'm telling them, it has very little to do with wrestling and more to do with, their health. And that's why I have this like confidence. And it was, one of the things I thought about was, when I was out in Rome, I'm like thinking, and I'm like, I'm feeling pretty good. Like, come to think of it, I don't have any excuses if I lose.
Right.
Like, I'm just, if I lose, I lose. That's it.
Right.
And there's a little bit of of peace with that. It's like, man, there's nothing I can do. If that guy's better than me on this day, hats off to him. He's better than me. Like, that's it. I have no excuses. That's it. And that I've tried to put myself in those positions as much as possible throughout my career. And, I could beat me on that day. It is what it is. I got to get better. And now I'm like, I got to get better at wrestling, but at the same time, there's not much more I can do. There's stuff I can do, but it hasn't even been invented yet. So right. I have to wait for that to come out. And then once it does, I can get better again. So, it's a cool side of history to be on.
For sure. And, it's so interesting because after a weekend like a couple weekends ago where you go out in the finals and you just absolutely dominate, and, part of it is wrestling's what have you done for me lately sport, and watching you wrestle, it ignites such a debate. Like, Dake's making the Olympic team. There's no way he doesn't make the Olympic team. And then there's the side of the argument that's like, listen, Burroughs is the GOAT until he's beaten. And it's amusing as a fan to watch both sides of the argument or the conversation, which is like, look at, Dake is a 2-time world champ. If we put him out there, he's going to win a gold medal for the U.S. And then the other side is, look at Jordan's a 5-time world Olympic champ. This could be the last year he wrestles. I want him to make the team, and I want him to go out on top. Like, what's your perspective on, wrestling Jordan at the trials where he's arguably the current greatest American wrestler there is, and he's in your way, right? Like, it's such a tough sport where only one of your dreams can come true in April. What's your perspective towards approaching that where it's like, I got to believe both you and him are such professionals, and, this is what you do for a living, and I don't think it's personal. You guys don't hate each other. You guys respect each other. What's the perspective going into a match like that?
Obviously, he's done a lot, and I've done a lot too, but it's a new day. This is a completely new version of Kyle Dake and Jordan Burroughs. They're new people.
Sure.
Whether it be better or worse, but it's new, and it's not going to be the way it was. And there's going to be some tendencies that are the same, but there's going to be some things that are different. And
right.
You have to go in with this fresh mindset every time, and that's the way I kind of approach it. Is like, all right, here we go. Let's go. I'm ready. You ready? Let's bang heads. Let's get it. And we're both like you said, we're both trying to accomplish this goal, and the goal we're pigeonholed, and we're pigeonholed in April, and there are 6 other weight classes or 18 other weight classes that are pigeonholed.
Yeah.
And because they're pigeonholed, some 18 people are going to be happy, 18 people are not going to be happy. So,
right.
Or more than 18 people.
More than that, right. Right.
So I'm just going at it like, hey, this is another competition. This is a big one, but it's another competition. Like, I have to make sure that I prepare these next 2 months to control as many variables as possible. What variables can I control? How can I make sure that there is nothing that I didn't do in order to put myself in a position to dominate and put myself in a position to where I have the opportunity to wrestle in Tokyo. So, people try to complicate it a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I have to beat whoever's in front of me. I honestly, it's not even guaranteed that I'll be able to wrestle Jordan. And
sure.
that's nothing. That's not, I feel like in the past, I would have thought of that as like a mental weakness, but now I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, that makes so much sense. It's just a sign of maturity. I'm going to have to wrestle 2 really good guys in order to get there. And I need to be on my A game for those guys. And, that's my plan. And my plan is to be able to decimate anybody I go out against. And, that's my goal, is to, go out in 10-0 or 12-0, all my competition. So that's kind of where I'm at and how I'm approaching every match.
For sure. And I think that's the proper perspective. Like, I think, like I said, you guys are arguably 2 of the most professional guys that could potentially rep the USA, and to have each other in your weight class, like, unless Jaden goes up to 97 and wrestles Snyder, and even then I'm not sure if it's the same. I'd probably say you and Burroughs is the 1 and 2, and then maybe Dake and or maybe Cox and Snyder would be close after that. But it's definitely the proper perspective, I think, to respect your opponent, where you have so many people that just kind of think ignorantly. But the last thing here I kind of want to bring up is, about a month ago, just before Christmas, you got a lot of people both nervous and excited about, you posted a video with using your hands and punching, and I'm curious on your perspective and your thoughts on MMA in your future.
A lot of that was it was about biomechanics, and
sure,
there's common threads, and we start pulling on enough threads, seeing where they end up, they lead you into some pretty specific places. And one of those is learning how to throw, not only just throw a ball, but throw your hand. And, learning how to punch is really, it makes you a lot stronger in a lot of different ways. And I'm not going to get into, all the specifics of it,
sure.
But, being able to throw a good combination, being able to throw a punch or being able to throw a good kick, is really good for your biomechanics. Is really good for the health of your body. And that was only the 3rd time I'd hit mitts before. Like, I had never done any boxing as a kid. I'd never done any of that. I had always been, just, if anybody tries to mess with me, I'm just going to wrestle them to the ground.
Right, you're taking them down.
Right. There's not a single person. There's not a person in the world that can stop my takedowns. So, there's probably maybe like 5 or 6 people in the entire world that could potentially stop my takedowns. So,
right.
I'm feeling pretty good about that. Just walking around Lansing, New York, where the population is about 10,000. So,
right.
And do I ever see a potential in an MMA career? It's possible. I'm not going to write anything off.
Sure.
But right now I'm focused on 2020, and I'm focused on taking care of my family. My little daughter's just running around like a crazy person.
I can hear her, and I'm smiling. Yeah.
She's just like sprinting from room to room trying. So
did your whole family come down to the OTC?
Yeah, I flew with my wife and my daughter Ella Jo yesterday.
I love that.
And we got a little Airbnb, like, I don't know, less than 5 miles away from the OTC. So we're hanging out in between sessions right now. Ella Jo needs to go needs to go down for a nap, but she's fighting it pretty hard. She wants to hear what Daddy has to say.
Everybody does, man. So listen, I'm grateful you took the time on a busy schedule to come on the show, and I know your fans are going to be excited. And I'm going to link up everything in the description of this podcast so people can follow you. Do you have an Instagram for the documentary too? I thought I saw that somewhere.
Yeah, it's called the Dake Doc.
Okay. Yeah, I'll link that up too. And yeah, at the Dake Doc on Instagram. Is it a Facebook page too?
Yes.
I'll find it and link that up too.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds good.
All right, cool, man. Well, listen, best of luck to you. I think that it's going to be absolute fireworks regardless of who you have at the trials. And if, the fans win and it's you versus Jordan, I think it's going to be the main event. So I'm pumped, and thank you for making the time to come on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, man. I'm grateful for what you bring to the sport and thankful for you coming on the show and telling your story. And I know all of these listeners are too. And speaking of you listeners, if you want to follow Dake on his journey through the Olympic trials, through potentially the Olympics, through MMA, I'm going to link up his social accounts below, his Dake documentary accounts below. Give him a follow and show him some love. And be sure to let us both know what you thought of this episode. If you're giving it a listen, you're still listening, share it on social, tag us, encourage your friends to give it a listen as well. Until next time, see ya.
And the beat goes on, goes on, goes on, goes on, goes